Hello, this is Entropy with Old Whatshisname, also known as Duncan Kuntz. How are you today, sir?
I'm happy to be here. Life is good.
What brings you to the conspiracy universe and lunaticoutpost.com?
Well, it's interesting. I guess I'd have to go back to the 1970s and 80s when I was pretty active in writing and publishing information for preparedness people or survivalist people, what you now call preppers. And like a lot of people, I at first was really concerned about the Y2K syndrome. And up until about 6 months before that, before the actual 2000 break, I was pretty much involved in being online, and a couple of friends of mine and I had a website, now gone, where we published how to do it things from an engineering point of view. And at that point, after about September of 1999, I realized that the Y2K thing was probably not that bad, and I sort of got out of it. But I met a lot of people doing that Y2K preparation for publishing. And as a result, I just hung around with some of them, and they introduced me first to ATS, then to the other forum, and then finally LOP. And I like LOP. It's a lot of fun. The people don't agree with me on a lot of things, but I learn a lot, and I have a good time. And that's how I got there. I've been on LOP since December of 2009, and the other website before that since 2002. So I've been around for a while.
You have a background in engineering, is that correct?
Yeah, I do. I started off life as an English major, going for an English degree at University of Maryland, specializing in 19th century British literature, which doesn't pay very well. Worked as a technical writer for a bunch of aerospace firms, and finally, when I was about 40, decided that a degree in engineering would help as well. And after that, I went back and got a degree in business administration, and now I'm just retired, having the background and not really putting it to too much use.
Did you work in engineering before Boeing?
Oh yes, I spent the first 10 years I was there. I was in their training systems where I was developing courseware for the Apache helicopter. And then the last 10 or 12 years, I was in the project office where I led a team of people preparing proposals for international customers. And the team included a lot of folks, engineers, pricing analysts, marketeers, logistics specialists, all kinds of guys banding together to try to sell country XYZ a bunch of Apaches. And I did that for about 10, 11 years before I retired.
A lot of posts on the forum are about chemtrails, and you seem to reply to this with an educated opinion that makes a lot of sense. Can you briefly tell us why it is that Old Whatshisname does not believe in chemtrails?
Well, the reasons are pretty simple. First off, having spent most of my life in aerospace, both at Motorola and IBM before I went to work for Boeing, I've been around aerospace and aircraft all my life, and I've taken enough courses and done enough reading in things like atmospheric physics and meteorology to realize that all of the things that people say are causing chemtrails are better explained by just completely natural phenomena. When an jet airplane flies at 30,000 feet, its exhaust is primarily water vapor. It flash freezes right away, and as long as the temperature up there is below minus 40 degrees and the relative humidity is saturated, that water vapor ice crystals is not going to sublime. If it's above minus 40 degrees, it'll go away. And that's the only reason why some contrails persist and other contrails don't persist. It has to do with the temperature and humidity at wherever altitude the contrails are. And, all the reasons that the chemtrail believers talk about just don't make any sense. For example, if there were such a conspiracy as chemtrails, everybody involved, all of the people who build the airplanes, who modify them, who build the engines, who modify, who put together the secret stuff, all the air traffic controllers, all the military, all the engineers, they'd all have to be in this huge plot. and you know that 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. How is the 300,000 people in the United States and the whole world are going to keep a secret? Because nobody's ever said, yes, I'm on my deathbed and I'll tell you all about it. It just doesn't happen. It's just, I think the reason that people believe in chemtrails is that science and mathematics are kind of tough for some people, and it's hard to understand things like that. And it's easy to look at things as though there's a conspiracy. It answers a lot of questions. Oh, yeah, that's why they're doing it. Besides, conspiracies are fun, even if they're not realistic. They're fun, and people tend to like that. For some people, chemtrails is actually a religion. They believe it by faith, and they're not going to listen to something they don't want to hear, and that's why you have a bunch of them around. Meanwhile, I just try to respond from a technical point of view and try not to lose my temper, which sometimes I do.
Who doesn't? What's your favorite conspiracy?
Well, as far as based on what I spend most of my time debunking, I guess chemtrails would be one of them. A lot of conspiracies around, I think, that are very realistic. For example, I believe there's widespread collusion between the various governments and big businesses and other pressure groups to fix things so that the normal people, the regular guys like us, get the short end of the stick. I believe that there's a lot of people in and out of government that are trying to take away people's freedoms, and they don't want us to know about it. The anti-gun people are some of them. The let's start another war to bring oil to the United States. Those are all, in my mind, if not conspiracies, at least collusions. And I think that we should really be worried about that rather than worried about other things. But as far as favorite ones are concerned, I don't know. Chemtrails is fun. Some of the other stuff, of course, the little purple spaceship guys from Arcturus and the underground tunnels and the Nazi bases on the moon or in Antarctica, they're kind of fun too. But I tend to try to limit most of my discussion to stuff that I know about, which is aviation related, aerospace related stuff. So I guess I'd have to say chemtrails. I guess that makes me a chemozoid too, in a way.
Can we get your opinion on the conspiracy that we never went to the moon?
Well, when I was a kid, like in my early 20s, I worked for IBM Federal Systems Division, which was the prime contractor for the computers for the Apollo and ASTP, Apollo Soyuz Test Program. Of course, these were big computers, and they weren't on board ships. They were on the ground, but I was very much involved working with them, and I was, as a matter of fact, one of the backup crew in Greenbelt. Not Houston. Houston is that Houston, you've got a problem, guys. But in Greenbelt, Maryland, there's a backup thing, and I was one of the people that was involved in that. So although I didn't get to meet but one astronaut in my whole life, I was working on the tail end of Gemini and the beginning of Apollo and also ASTP, almost to about 1974. And to my mind, that if that's not evidence that we did land on the moon, and since I read up on it, was actually involved in it in a very minor way, I think that people who talk about the moon landing being a hoax don't know anything about astronomy or photography or the Van Allen belt. It's just that they believe it because they believe it. But the whole moon landing hoax concept is bogus. We went to the moon. The reason we don't go now is we lost our national will and we don't have the money anymore. Lyndon Johnson, in his infinite wisdom, decided it would make more sense for us to have a war on poverty, which we lost, and a war in Southeast Asia, which also we lost, rather than go to the stars. And that's one of the reasons why the next time the people land on the moon, they'll be speaking Chinese instead of English.
That's a very good answer. How do you feel about the military-industrial complex from your experience working with the aerospace industry?
Well, I can say a lot of things about the military-industrial complex with a little bit more honesty now that I'm no longer part of it. I think that the job that I did was an honorable one. I think that putting money and effort and skull sweat into designing designing weaponry for defense of the country is a good thing. What I think is bad is the way that we use that weaponry, thanks to our politicians, and also to a lot of lobbying from the military-industrial complex, including my former employers. We got involved in a lot of wars that were designed to improve our oil supply and extend our power. And these wars that we got into, every one of them that I can remember since I was born, were wars that we lost, and we turned the entire world against us. And I think that the military-industrial complex as a whole bears a portion of that responsibility. If we've kept on getting involved in one war after another, pretty soon the entire world will be against us, if they already aren't. So I don't like that aspect of the military-industrial complex, because they've done more to hurt our country and a bunch of other folks than anybody else.
Is the leap of scientific progress and its application benefiting humanity, or do you think it will ultimately lead to our demise?
I don't think science is either advancing or leading to it. Science is just a way of looking at the world. Science is not a bunch of guys with letters after their names and white coats with bubbling test tubes. Science is a way of asking questions about the universe. I think that some of the ways that humans use technology is good and some of it's bad. Every technological advance that we have made so far, from fire and the wheel and agriculture and metal and even shipping stone tools, has had its good side and its bad side. And I think that science is neither bad nor good, it just is. I think our use of technology right now, it's a wash. Some of the stuff makes us a lot better, some of the stuff makes us a lot worse. Which one's going to win out in the end? I don't know. I'd say that you ask me in 50 years, but I'll be dead by then. You have to find that one out for yourself.
I view debunking as an important tool that separates fact from myth. Why is it, do you feel, there is so much backlash against people on the forums that use debunking as a tool?
You mean they all don't love me?
I'm sure they love both of us wholeheartedly. But why do you think that there's such a push against the scientific method on these forums, and also people who debunk conspiracy theories that have no actual merit to them?
Well, I think that's kind of a two-sided question. First off, why do people need to be debunked, and why do people debunk? Some things people look at from a theological point of view. They want to believe something, and they do. Whether it's the literalness of the Bible, or whether it's the profound belief that Santa Claus exists, or whether it's the belief that white people are better than black people, or whether there's belief in chemtrails or anything else, these people believe something without really any reason behind it, because it makes them feel better for one reason or another. A uneducated white person might feel that he has to have someone lower in the chain of being than him, so becomes a racist. A kid wants to have Christmas presents, so he believes in Santa Claus. People want to believe that technical problems are easily understood if you just look at them from a point of view of conspiracy. So they believe in chemtrails or spaceship guys and underground bases or so ever. And you can't reason somebody out of something they didn't reason themselves into in the first place. And because of that, people who believe in something with an emotional overtone, whether it's Jesus or Allah or chemtrails or anything else, have a real strong emotional investment in it, and they get very upset because they think when you're attacking their beliefs, you're attacking them. And as a result, they get very angry. I think they even get more upset when they realize that, oh my God, this guy has a point. He's going to screw up my whole viewpoint of the world. I got to yell at him and call him a shill. The other question is, why do people debunk in the first place? In my case, I used to be a school teacher many years ago, and I don't like the idea of ignorance abounding. People talk about, you asked me earlier, for example, how important is science in helping us to build a better world, or is it a negative thing? I think the more people know about science, the more people understand the scientific method, the more people are able to reason coherently, the better off we as a society will be. And that's one of the reasons that I want to do it. Plus, it's fun.
Were you a science teacher?
No, as a matter of fact, I taught fifth grade.
Ah,
And
okay.
since I discovered music as a young man, I've also given music lessons for 50 years now, ever since I was in my late teens, and I continue doing it today as a part of my post-retirement sanity check. But I have done tutoring in science, and I have done some guest teaching at a couple of junior high schools and high schools when I was working for the Boeing company as through a Boeing program. So I'm familiar with science as a teaching tool and hopefully as a career.
What was your most interesting experience as a school teacher?
Probably the most experience was when the Boeing company sent me to talk about the advantages of an engineering education to a ninth grade class in East Mesa. And I'd never been to that class before, and I walked in there, and I'd gone to teach several classes, and I walked into this one class, and the teacher said, "You are bilingual, aren't you? None of the kids here speak English. You have to make your entire presentation in Spanish." And I said, "Well, here goes nothing. I was not prepared to lecture in Spanish." I managed to get through it because I can't speak Spanish, but that was pretty scary. And when the kids asked me questions, I kept telling them to slow down. That was pretty exciting. Another exciting term was when I had this one kid in class who just did not understand anything. And I explained something to him 3 or 4 times, and suddenly the light bulb went off in his head, and he caught it. And I went home that day with a blinding headache, but my God, it was worth it. Those are the kind of days I think are most interesting, where you succeed, where you overcome tremendous things put in the way, like having to teach in another language. Era muy difícil, es verdad.
If you could improve the education system in this country, how would you do that?
I would get the government out of the education business. The federal government lays a one-size-fits-all approach on every student, forces all the students to learn the same way, denies schools the right, denies individual areas the right to determine what kind of schooling they want for their kids by withholding or threatening to withhold federal funds. And as a result, since the teachers know that they're not going to be fired, no matter what, there's no incentive for them to get better. Since if you don't like my school, there's no other school in the neighborhood for you to go to, why should you work on making your school better? I like the idea of a free enterprise school system. Perhaps government tax rebates for private schools. I don't want to spend your tax money on my brand of school. I just want to be able to spend my own tax money on it. And I think if the government provided parents with a tax rebate or a tax credit so they could send their kids to a school of their choice, you as a parent might want to send your kid to a government school, or you might want to send them to a Montessori school, or to a Black Muslim school, or to a Catholic school, or any kind of school you wanted to. But the parents should have the choice. And if that were the case, you'd start seeing schools realizing that the only way they're going to keep students is if they compete and work harder. So student A hires a better teacher and student B hires another one. And pretty soon you have schools competing to give the students the best education at the lowest price. And that, more than anything else, would not only improve the value of the schools, but give the parents the freedom of choice that I think they deserve.
You mentioned that you're a musician too. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I've been playing guitar since I was 15, which would be 53 years, and banjo almost that long. Played in rock and roll bands when I was a young man. Played stand-up bass in a jazz band. Played country, and now in my declining years, I play mostly bluegrass music, play five-string banjo and guitar and stand-up bass sometimes.
Do you perform?
Oh yes, yes. One of my bands, Red Mount Bluegrass Band, has a couple albums out on the web, and we do a lot of gigs. The interesting thing is that all of us are either retired or we all have other jobs. So we just play when we want to. We'll play 2 or 3 bluegrass festivals, maybe 4 or 5 bluegrass festivals a year, once every couple of months. Another band I'm in plays a week-long gig at an agri-entertainment center every year. Did I mention singing? One of the bands doesn't let me have a microphone. The other band does, but they don't let me plug it in. I play much better than I sing, unfortunately.
Would you be willing to share a story about your musical experience throughout the years?
Well, when I was back in Maryland, I was playing country music, top 40 Nashville country music, in a bar that had a chain link fence around the band. And it was kind of a place where you leave your engine running, so when a fight broke out, the first one out of the parking lot. And we were playing for a rowdy crowd one night, and someone threw a beer bottle at somebody else, and I threw it back. And they threw a beer bottle at the band. It was full, and I remember watching it in slow motion, coming end over end. And I ducked my head just a bit, and it passed me and took out the drummer and knocked him off. That was a scary place. As far as playing with people, I've did some studio work when I was younger, and I got to meet some fairly well-known musicians. I don't know if you're familiar with people like Gordon Lightfoot, John Denver. I'm sure you're familiar with guys like that. But that wasn't really interesting. That was just getting a chance to play with so many neat guys. But to be honest, being a musician is not screaming chicks, in the words of the late, great Omega, hookers and coke. It's just a job. That's really all it's been for me. A fun job, but just a job.
What other hobbies do you enjoy?
Well, my wife and I are both avid scuba divers. We scuba dive every chance we get. We've been to the Caribbean to Belize, a lot of places in Mexico, Hawaii, Micronesia, and both of our kids dive too. My wife and I are both also pretty avid amateur geologists. We spend a lot of time on scuba diving, hiking and exploring the Colorado Plateau up in Utah. And then I like riding motorcycles. My wife is not. So I guess motorcycles, geology, scuba diving, and my wife and I both love to cook. Unfortunately, we like cooking too much, which is why I'm always on my diet. I guess those are my hobbies. And chemtrails.
You've done a lot of traveling. What was your favorite place to visit?
I was raised in Micronesia until I was 17. My father was with the government. One of my favorite trips was in 2006 where my family and I went back there for a month of scuba diving. Truck Lagoon, Palau, Yap, Majuro, Pohnpei. It was the one that we call the Camry vacation because it cost us about as much as a really tricked out Toyota Camry, but it was worth it. That was a fun trip. When I was working for Boeing, I spent 6 months back and forth in Japan. That was a good place to go. My brother lives in Costa Rica. I like visiting him there. But my favorite place to visit, I guess right now, is just right around the southwestern part of the United States, mostly Utah, portions of New Mexico and Colorado, and of course Arizona. Those are all good places to visit.
You seem to be a busy guy. Is it fair to say that you view staying busy as the key to happiness in life?
Well, I like being busy. I don't like being bored. I spend about an hour or two a day poking around the computer. I write essays and stuff like that, and I write poetry for fun. I guess I enjoy working about 3 months ago, after having been retired for a year, I just got bored out of my skull and took a 3-day-a-week job at one of these home improvement warehouses, which has turned into a lot of fun. But yeah, keeping busy is good. Most importantly, though, is keeping your head busy. My wife and I are always going back to school. We go to a local junior college in Mason. We take a course here and there. She took a marine biology course. I took a sedimentology course, a geology course, advanced geology courses. We both like doing that. And yeah, I think keeping busy and keeping your mind stretched will keep you healthy. I think the best way to be happy is to be honest and caring for your family. That means an awful lot for me. I'm lucky that I have 2 grown kids who are good kids and make me proud of them. And we hang together now and then. Of course, at ages 23 and 28, they're also on their own. But I'm happy because I'm doing a lot of stuff, and I've got a great wife and kids. And my wife lets me have 2 motorcycles. And good God, what can I do?
Who are your favorite authors?
Pardon?
Who are your favorite authors? Writers?
Well, I read a lot of technical stuff. My favorite authors for fun reading is probably Robert Heinlein, the great science fiction writer, one of the greatest alive. I think his stuff is wonderful. He understands the future. He understands society. As an English major, I took a lot of Shakespeare courses. I read most of Shakespeare's stuff. As far as science books and things like that, Michio Kaku, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a pretty good guy. Carl, slipped my mind. A lot of the major science writers are great guys. They're great guys to listen to and read. I also read a lot of poetry. I like Browning, Eliot, Shelley, Aubrey Beardsley, people like that. But I try to read everything I can. What I don't like reading is People magazine and Us. And I'm sorry to say I don't keep up with the Kardashians. I guess I'm not a big fan of it, reading about them. Fun stuff, yeah.
I'm not a big fan of that either. Do you think the U.S. media spends too much time on two-party politics and Hollywood to actually be effective as a source of news and information?
Of course they do. But the media, all media, gives people what they want. The USA Today gives people shortcuts to stuff. The media that talks about the Kardashians and who's sleeping with who in Hollywood gives people what they want. If you want something that's good news, like you can always read The Economist or or Al Jazeera, or any of the other mainstream magazines and outlets that tend to provide news. But the bottom line is, if you want to really understand news, you can't read one magazine. For example, if I read anything on the Mideast, I tend to read articles on both Al Jazeera and Haaretz, the main Israeli magazine, because I get 2 sides. Both Haaretz and Al Jazeera are great outlets, but they have conflicting biases, so you can understand it. If you want to read about what's really going on in Japan, you might want to read the English version of Asahi Shimbun, or if China, you want to read People's Daily. For Russia, I don't know. Well, you can't. There's not much in Russia that's really valid stuff. But I found out that if you really want to understand things, don't read one newspaper or listen to one radio station. Get a bunch of them, especially find them that conflict with each other, so you can read between the lines and figure out what's best. In order to be able to read, you got to have good eyes and a bullshit filter. And I like to think that I do that as best I can.
There was a push to get the United States involved in a conflict in Syria not long ago. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I think it's great. I think that we've got to the point now where we're not getting any people killed in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we haven't gone into Venezuela yet. So yeah, I definitely we ought to go into Syria. We ought to spend another $1 trillion there and get half of our people killed and make the rest of the world hate us. Sarcasm off. I think getting involved in any land war outside the United States is stupid. I was in one in Vietnam. That was when I was in the military. The last time there was a war that made any sense was World War II. We have no business being in any of those countries. If the people in Syria want to settle their differences, let them do it. I don't believe that we should be subsidizing Egypt or Syria or Iraq or Israel or Lebanon or any place else. I think President Washington said it best when he said, entangling alliances with nobody, but peaceful commerce with anyone who wants it. And I am not a believer in getting involved in any wars, whether it's for oil or to show that we have the biggest penis or whatever reason America goes to war. Our defense should be defense. And the Syrians, either side, either one of them is any threat to us. Let them work it out among themselves. Thank you very much.
A lot of people that I talk to out in public say that the space program is a waste of money, and I argue against that. I believe the space program is actually underfunded. How do you feel about the space program and its benefits to us as a nation?
Well, I think it has to do with where we're wired. We've been involved in space research ever since the late Pliocene, when we started coming down out of the trees and walking across the savannas, heading out of Africa, going throughout the whole world, sailing across one ocean, discovering Hawaii and the New World, going down to Australia. That's what we do. That's what our race is about. Going somewhere and learning new things. It's in our blood. It's in our genes. The United States is only part of the entire world, and the entire world needs to keep expanding, not with more people, but with more ideas. Someday, we're going to need to be someplace else. Someday, we're going to need to have the ability to go to other planets. Right now, we have the opportunity to do so if we didn't waste our money on stupid wars and crackpot social schemes. We learn a lot from our space exploration. I mean, everyone talks about, development of Teflon, weather satellites and stuff like that, but there's more to it than that. We need to explore because that's what humans do. And I know it sounds kind of woo here, but that is our sacred destiny as human beings, to explore, to go where no one has been before. Where have I been before? We don't spend enough money in the space program. It's kind of sad that we have decided to put our priorities elsewhere. And when I say we, I'm talking about the entire world, with the possible exception of China. They're the only ones that see the advantages to space programs, and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. But no, the space program provides so many benefits, both emotional and, dare I say it, spiritual, that we must keep on going with the space program, and we must expand it.
During the early days of America, families used to venture westward into the unknown, into reportedly savage lands, and risk their lives for the sake of exploration and settlement. Have we lost our sense of adventure?
Yeah, I think, well, to an extent. Here in Arizona, a lot of people in the Intermountain West can trace their ancestry back 7 or 8 generations to a bunch of people that came across the continent pushing hand carts from Illinois and Missouri to Salt Lake City because they wanted to have religious freedom. That's only been 150 years, and today some of that still remains, but not very much. Some people think it's better just to be relaxed and kick back. I like to think of us, no, I don't like to think of us. Unfortunately, I do think of us as being where the Romans were after about 200 BC, after they conquered the Mediterranean. The Republic was already rotten, and they were beginning to kick back and relax. Bread and circuses. They lost their spirit. They lost their sense of nobility, their sense to explore and do better things. And although the empire lasted another 600 years, they were on a downhill slide. Sometimes I feel very worried that we are on a downhill slide right now.
I find it ironic that we lose so many Americans in these wars and we never stop wars. But if we lose an astronaut in an accident, it seems like we put the space program on hold for years to try to, make it safer. Nothing against making it safer, but it just seems ironic to me that we do that.
Well, I think this ties into your earlier question about the sense of exploration. The astronauts themselves, almost all of them, the early ones, were engineers. They worked with slide rules and calculators. They understood the odds. They knew, for example, that when they went to the moon, there was a small but potential chance that they would be injured by radiation. They were willing to take it. When the first astronauts went up, and I'm not only talking about the Americans, but the incredibly brave Soviet astronauts that went up in their junk buckets. These heroes knew that they were taking a chance to die, but they were impelled to go, whether it was by freedom or patriotism or want to get ahead of the Americans, or Russians, or whatever it was. They were impelled to go forward, taking chances because they knew that in the final analysis, the thing that awaited them was not only knowledge, but glory. For some reason, we tend to glorify people getting killed in war. I'm not sure why, although I'm a military veteran, I don't understand that. But yet the astronauts who would be more than glad to go are the ones who are told, no, you have to stay here. We can't justify you being killed. I cannot understand that. It makes no sense.
Who's your favorite historical figure?
Oh, there's a couple of them. One of them, I can't think of the guy's name. Anunnakis, I believe it was. He was the first great program manager. Imhotep, that's right. His name was Imhotep. He was the chief project manager for the Pharaoh, the guy that designed and ran the program that built the Great Pyramid at Giza. He's considered by people in the program management business as the father of us all. He's pretty good. He's a pretty good guy from what I read of him. Another good guy that I've always thought was a great person was George Washington, an engineer himself, a surveyor. Mm-hmm. Did all these jobs, and then when his job was over, like a true Cincinnatus, he went back to the farm. Didn't seek any glory, just wanted to do his job, and he did it pretty well. Those two guys are right up there in my book. I would say those are two of my favorite historical characters. Now, when it comes to hysterical characters, well, that's the difference.
Who's your favorite hysterical character? Without mentioning any posters on LOP, hopefully.
Well, you shot me down right there. I think one of my favorite hysterical characters, the person who I really like a lot, this person disagrees with everything I believe in, and he's got a very nasty wit sometimes, and yet he is so, there's something about him that makes me really like him a lot. I'm not going to mention any names because you might guess there's not that many British pirates around, but he's one of my favorite hysterical characters as far as a lot of people are concerned. Susie, I like Susie, but hysterical characters, I don't know. I think some of the presidents we've had recently, matter of fact, most of them have been pretty hysterical because you have to laugh because you can't cry at some of them. Whether the opponents say if
not. George Washington said in his farewell address, I can't quote him, I don't have it with me, I do remember, to paraphrase it, that political parties are a bad thing. Do you see the two-party system as holding us back from paying attention to the real problems and just continuing them from one administration to another? Or does a two-party system help us in a way that maybe people don't understand?
Well, I got to start off by saying, first off, when you're talking about two parties, you're talking about two old parties, the Democrats and Republicans. In the 1980s, I was very much involved in the Libertarian Party, and I was the vice chairman of the Arizona State Libertarian Party and recording secretary as well. And I was pretty familiar with them. Political parties do a lot of stuff, some of it good, some of it bad. I think what is really bad about the political parties is that they tend to not give us a choice. Historically anyway, the Republicans have not ever nominated a screaming neo-Nazi, and the Democrats have not nominated a screaming communist. And a lot of people say, well, we ought to have a choice. The problem is that most Americans don't want to have that kind of choice. They want to have two guys which are more or less on the same line. I think the biggest problem is not so much the parties, but the concept of the conservatives and liberals, because both of them, although they pretend to be opposed to each other, both believe in the same thing: a big nosy government with its, eyes in your bedroom and hands in your wallet, and they're just two different sides of the same corporate fascist welfare warfare status crowd. They don't. I think most Americans don't understand that conservatives and liberals are pretty much the same thing, where the real differentiation between politics are that some people believe that the government should take care of you whether you want to be taken care of or not, and some people don't. And I think if they had a freedom versus statism split in the country, and if that kind of split or that kind of dichotomy were represented by two parties, a freedom party and a government control party, the people of America would be able to make their choice. Mm-hmm. And I don't know who'd win. A lot of people want to have a big government to control them and take care of them. I'm not one of them. But I think the false dichotomy of Republicans, or the false dichotomy of conservatives versus liberals, is much more dangerous and much less healthy than the parties themselves.
Do you believe that people are becoming too dependent on government and consumerism to take care of them? They're not. Let's say tomorrow the Earth got hit by a large solar flare and the power went out. How many people would actually be ready to take care of themselves and live without going out and committing horrible crimes against other people and stealing things? How do you think that people are just too dependent on our modern society to be able to function?
Absolutely, no question about that. People have become addicted to government, just like government has become addicted to oil. Our entire infrastructure is built around centralization of power, fuel, and stuff like that. If the infrastructure were damaged severely, the electricity would go off. There would be no food because it doesn't come from the farm anymore. It comes from the supermarkets, which are provided by diesel burning tractor trailers. I think if there were a major infrastructure failure, the United States, within 6 months, if it were not resolved, millions and millions and millions of people would die. There would be horrible things to happen. That's just where we are right now. 100 years ago, it would not have been nearly so bad because there were fewer people. There was a greater percentage of agriculture being practiced, and there was not that much dependence on anything except telegraph lines and railroad trains, all of which they could have gotten by without. Nowadays, you can't do that anymore. If there were a solar flood that knocked out our power, or if there were some other disaster that knocked out our infrastructure, it would be a great calamity. It would be like nothing else we've seen, except perhaps the bubonic plague of the 1200s. We are very, very vulnerable to that kind of activity. and we will continue to be.
You've been critical of nuclear power in the past, and the recent accidents may very well justify the criticism that you've given nuclear power. How safe are nuclear power plants?
Well, I don't believe I've really said anything negative against nuclear power. When I was in the Navy, I spent some time within about 30 or 40 feet of a nuclear power plant. There are a lot of submarines, for example, have those. Nuclear power is pretty safe if it's built right. There's only been one disaster
Mm-hmm.
that came from bad design, and that was the Ukrainian failure at Chernobyl.
Yes,
The 3 Mile Island was everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong, yet because of the redundant safety, nobody was killed.
that's true.
Daiichi Fukushima, on the other hand, was designed to last, to be able to withstand against a 500-year earthquake. Unfortunately for them, a 600-year earthquake came along, and that resulted in tsunami, which, could not have been really avoided or prevented, took it out. Nuclear power can be done well. I think that the United States and all the other countries and the people in there who are against nuclear power just seem to fail to realize that what other options are there. Photovoltaics will not give you that much power. We're running low on oil and they pollute. We've already pretty much used up all the abilities of us to get hydroelectricity because we pretty much dam most of the major rivers in the world. Nuclear power is our really only choice. It may not be the best one, but it's the least worst one. If we design them with, say, thorium instead of uranium and plutonium, it'd be a lot safer. But I think the only problem with nuclear power is the perceptive power. We have the engineering capability and we have the money to build it. It's just the politics of nuclear power which makes it a bad thing right now. And there's not much individuals can do about that, except write your congressman.
My apologies. I may have confused you with someone, another veteran poster on the forum when it came to nuclear power. How would you view the state of the U.S. economy? I've heard people say that it's horrible. I've heard people say it's improving. You seem to be a pretty rational guy, so can you give us your take on that, please?
Well, first off, I have a state that one of the best economical news in the past few days is an incredible spurt of growth by the Boeing company, who holds my pension funds and a lot of my 401k, and they're doing real well. The stock market itself is doing real well. But I don't think that's going to last very long. We are spending ourselves into real danger. The amount of money that we are spending right now just in servicing our debt, not paying it off, but just servicing it, is high, and it's getting higher. We are going to have to raise taxes more and more and more to pay for our obligations, especially to those damned old people like me, for Social Security and Medicare. And if we do not stop spending more money than we take in and try to make up the deficit by printing it, we are going to end up with a very bad situation. Sooner or later, the government is going to get to the point where most of the people who really count, i.e. the Chinese and the other people who invest in our country, are going to say, maybe buying these U.S. bonds doesn't make any sense, so we'll have to offer higher and higher interest rates, which will drive up our cost of servicing the debt even more, and we will end up with a spiral where we may very well have to actually default on our loans, which, despite what the Tea Party people says, would be a mitigated disaster. So I believe that we are not in good shape in the long run. That's one of the reasons why I believe that most people who care about this should take whatever prudent steps they should to ensure that they have the basics. 6 months worth of rent or mortgage put away, a year's supply of food, enough stuff to let them pull through if things get real bad. More and more people are doing this, I think, and that's a good thing. But overall, it's going to be needed because because the economy is good now, but it could be the calm before the storm. When the storm comes, I don't know when it's going to be. It could be very bad.
Historically, our country has a very low turnout of electorate on election day compared to other countries. Why do you think there's so much apathy in society?
Most Americans are lazy, and or most Americans think that their vote doesn't count, and or most of them think that even if their vote counted, there's not a dime's worth of difference between the various thugs that are running for office, all of which I think are of major import. I like to vote, especially among the local area, among the local issues, because I have a saying that. But I can understand why people don't vote. Why? I don't like this guy. I don't like that guy. They're the same guy. Besides, you got a football game on tonight. And I don't think we can do anything about that either. I don't think the government has the right to force people to vote. The idea of requiring voting like some countries do, that's bogus. If voting is about freedom, then the person should be free not to vote and make a fool of himself. But yeah, we as Americans have very low thanks to voting. Better than North Korea, but yeah, pretty bad.
Do you think there's a way that we can get better candidates in office?
Under the present system, no. No, not as long as you have primaries. Primaries attract the hardcore radical voters. If you can't win a primary here in Mesa, Arizona, unless you're a right-wing Republican. So right-wing that you might not win the general election. It used to be said about the Democrats, if you were liberal enough to win the primary, you were too liberal to be elected. Now it's about the Republicans. If you're conservative enough to win the primary, you're not conservative enough to win the election. But the primary system, which only attracts the hardcore workers, tends to polarize us and give us with two guys that only speak to a small group who has the power. And that's not the big companies or the Illuminati or the Masons. That's the primary voters. And those people are bad people. They're just hardcore, telling the real radicals, right or left, and what they want to hear. As a result, you have poor candidates running. You don't have people that are willing to compromise, and you have to compromise. That's what politics is about.
A popular subject on conspiracy websites seems to be unidentified flying objects. Have you
I'm sorry?
unidentified flying objects, UFOs? Do you see any credible evidence of the existence of unidentified flying objects as anything other than just being unidentified
No,
aircraft? Okay.
I've never seen any evidence that ties what we see to the visitation of extraterrestrial intelligences. I think that the recent discoveries of exoplanets, along with the modifications of the Drake equations, tells us that without doubt there's a lot of intelligence out there. However, the chances of it visiting Earth either now or in the past is vanishingly small from a statistical point of view. And no, I haven't seen anything that tells me that yes, there are some. There may be. I've just never seen any evidence for it.
Do you believe that a program like SETI may be able to discover extraterrestrial intelligence? And if so, what's the chances that that may occur in our lifetime?
Yes, and poor. See, the SETI is a good approach because it just lets us listen. The chances of it picking up something is based on the fact that there are radio generating species nearby, like within the next 100 light years, and that the radio signal has not attenuated. Wait long enough and it'll happen. It could be a year from now, it could be 5 years from now, it could be 10,000 years from now. Sooner or later it will happen. And as long as it doesn't cost that much to implement, which it doesn't, I think it's a good idea. We may hit the jackpot. I'm not betting on it.
How do you think it would affect society if they did announce that they detected radio signals from another civilization?
A lot of new religions start. A lot of old religions quit. I don't know. I think a lot of people would be scared. A lot of people would be excited, happy. A lot of politicians would step in and see, let these damn Mexicans in now. We're going to let the space guys build the border around the world. A lot of guys would say, no, man, this is what we want to do. We'll greet them with peace, love, dove, incense, and crash pads. And you're going to have all kinds of responses because there's all kinds of people. I think it'd be great if we discovered proof of extraterrestrial intelligence in my lifetime. I would just be considered the most wonderful and exciting thing ever. It'd be scary.
So, if you were in charge and they did find a signal, you would definitely put it out there, right, to
Well,
the public.
certainly, if they found a signal, well, I mean, it's like this whole business about comets and nibble you and all that stuff like that. There's 10,000 astronomers out there, not just, and those are just the ones that are working for all the various governments, and they constantly talk back and forth to each other. That's not counting the millions of amateur astronomers who have the techniques with their modern stuff to find all that stuff out. If there was a signal coming in from out there, it would be worldwide knowledge within a week. All the scientists would know about it within a day. I mean, the government's not going to be able to hide that, even if they wanted to. Why would they? I mean, panic? Well, they care about panic. They would probably try to put a good spin on it. Yep, we heard from the spaceship guys, and they're all liberal Democrats, or conservative Republicans, or communists, or whatever it was you wanted them to be. It would be fun. I think there'd be a lot of posturing around, but you couldn't hide.
If we were to detect a signal that wasn't just mathematical in nature, saying, hey, we're here, look at us, what kind of methods would we use to try to interpret that? Or could we?
Well, I don't know. If it was, if it were pictures, if it were, we would try to. I guess we'd try to heterodyne circuits. If someone's radio signal, we'd try to heterodyne it if we could. We would try to examine, see if it had time shifts or frequency shifts or amplitude shifts to see if you could get something out of it. We might try to figure out different ways of turning it into something besides, if it were digital, into yeses and nos, or maybe yeses, nos, and maybes. If it were analog, we might try to make a picture out of it. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I'm not that. I don't have that kind of expertise. I'm sure that every damn scientist in the world would be working on it, though. Get the first picture of the little purple spaceship guys. I think it'd be fun.
Do you have a good view of the sky down there in Arizona?
Well, absolutely. Where I live in Mesa, Mesa's it's 400,000 people, and we're only about 20 miles east of the fifth largest city in the country, which is Phoenix. But you go out a few miles, and the sky is just stunning. You can see the Milky Way. It's beautiful, and it's usually clear too, because Arizona is pretty dry.
Have you tried to see icing yet?
No, I have an 8-inch Schmidt Cassegrain. I haven't taken it out. It takes a long time to set it up. One of my friends has a 14-inch Maxitov. He's up in the high country. He has a cabin up there in the high country, and he has it set up. That's a huge telescope, and he keeps threatening to drag me up there. But no, I can see better pictures of it on the internet.
Do you think it's going to kill us all?
No, it's not going to. It's like most. It's either going to be a parabolic or hyperbolic. It is either a parabolic or a hyperbolic orbit, which means it's going to get real close to the sun and may whip around after losing a lot of its mass, or it may just be dragged into the sun and plop. And if the comet were to hit the sun, it would have the same catastrophic event as it would if you were to pee in the lake. I mean, what's so much. There's no mass to the comet. It's a big coma. If the comet hit the Earth now, that would be kind of a big thing because there are a lot of big parts. But I mean, the only thing they could do that would be fun would be to hit the sun. If it hit Jupiter, like make a levy did, well, that'd be interesting to watch. Not something to get around. But no, it's not the case. You just use Newtonian mechanics. They figured that one out. If they do, I'm going to find a cave.
In your travels across America, you've probably tried a lot of really good food. Who has the best?
Well,
Hmm.
Southwestern foods, Mexican foods, of course, which is one of the great cuisines of the world. City of Tucson has the only place I've ever been. Um, I think that if you want to get any kind of food, there's only one city that has that, and that's a city that's in Illinois. Many years ago, a bunch of New Yorkers got together and they said, you know, we really like New York because it's so crowded and polluted, but it's not cold enough. And that's how Chicago got started. But by God, they've got the best food in the world. Anything you want to eat, you can get in Chicago. I'd say Chicago's got the best food.
You're not the first person to tell me that. Must be true.
Yeah, there's a lot of different stuff. Part of the reason is Chicago is racially split apart. There's an Italian neighborhood, black neighborhoods, Hispanic, Polish, Greek, and stuff like that. So if you find out what a Greek neighborhood is, Andersonville, for example, you can go there and there's lots of good Greek restaurants. You can find any kind of restaurant you want to. It's not catch as catch can, whereas in Phoenix, it's either Mexican or God knows what. But because Chicago is both ethnically diverse and also separated, yeah, you can find good food there.
Do you have an opinion on GMO vegetables and fruits?
No, I don't think. I think the jury's out on GMO foods right now. Um, it's not coming. It's already here. GMO foods have some advantages. I think most of the stuff that you hear about GMO foods from the doomsayers is silly. On the other hand, the fact that a lot of the stuff that you hear from Monsanto is very biased too. I think the reality is someplace in between. GMO has its place, but in the final analysis, it doesn't matter. GMO foods are already taken over, and we're not going to be able to go back. It's like getting toothpaste back into the tube, or like getting 12 million Mexicans to go back to Mexico. It's not going to happen. It's here. I think that overall, it's going to provide more nourishment for more people in the world that could save a lot of people in third world countries. And I think the health hazards of GMO foods may be real, but I don't think they're that big of a deal. Again, I'm not a nutritionist. I hear a lot of stuff, but I don't put much credence in either the God is awful or God is great, one way or the other. Just wait and see for me.
Can we get your take on the climate change subject?
Everybody believes in climate change in the world except for the United States and China. There's two different reasons for this. China does not pay much attention to climate change because they know that they're the biggest polluter in the world, and they're willing to sacrifice that kind of belief just so they can keep on growing, which they're not going to be able to do much longer. Americans, on the other hand, probably 30 or 40% of them, if not more, do not believe that there is such a thing as anthropogenic climate change. I think they're wrong. I think there's just too much evidence, just based on basic physics and the way that carbon dioxide acts in the atmosphere and measurements, that a lot of our climate is changing. It's changing drastically. And a major reason it's changing drastically is that human beings, and plus a few pooping cows within that thing, have been putting pollution into the air, mostly carbon monoxide. And I think the fact that the seas are warming up by almost a degree centigrade is one of the reasons why we're having typhoons in the Pacific, like Haiyan, which wiped out major cities in the Philippines. It's the reason why we have these more and bigger hurricanes in the Atlantic. It's probably a reason why, or it's contributing to the reason why we have all these hurricanes. I mean, tornadoes all over the place in places where you don't expect them. I think those are all aspects of global warming, of climate change. And here in Arizona, we've been having a drought for a long time. It's not as bad as the 1200s drought that wiped out the Sinagua tribes, like 900 years ago. But we're seeing a drought that points to some sort of climate change. And yeah, I think it's here. Most people don't. There are a few people, including scientists, who say it's not true, but probably 95% of all the climatologists, all the people that study that kind of stuff, say it's happening. I believe it is too. I don't know how it's going to play out. I have no idea whether we're going to be able to do anything about it or not, because by the time everybody, you know, even Ray Lensman finally buys into it, it'll probably be too late. We'll probably be past the tipping point if we're not there already. That bothers me a lot. It's one of the two things that bother me a whole bunch about the future of the world, climate change.
What's the other thing?
The fact that we are breeding thousands of varieties of drug-resistant bacteria by our practices of giving everybody broad-spectrum antibiotics where they don't need it. We already have hepatitis, tuberculosis, and a bunch of other bacteria that are resistant to any drugs, and we keep trying to come up with drugs, and it keeps getting ahead of us. Sooner or later, we're going to come up with a couple that we're going to have forced the evolution of some bacteria that are going to be completely resistant to whatever drugs we have, and we could see some major, very serious problems with health. Dare I say, epidemics, which may be as bad as the two Black Death plagues of 500 AD and 1200 AD. It could be that bad, and that to me is every bit as bothersome as global warming and the loss of our water supply. Bad stuff.
Do you think humanity will overcome the obstacles that face it?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, we overcame the desertification at the end of the Pliocene. There were probably only about 1,000 human beings left in the whole world. They were all in what's now Sahara. Nice get out. There's life tends to go on. There's too many people. There's so many people in the world in so many different ecological niches that no matter how bad a problem there was, humanity would survive. They might be back in the Stone Age, but they will survive. Either way, Mother Nature will do its course. We have problems with pollution, and we have problems with overcrowding and population growth. They'll be taken care of. They may be taken care of in a very bloody way, but they'll be taken care of. Humanity will survive. You might not want to be there, but they'll survive.
Am I correct in concluding that you are a believer in the theory of evolution?
Oh, absolutely. It's a basic fact.
How would you explain evolution to a non-believer?
I wouldn't. A non-believer, most people that I know who do not believe in evolution are not amenable to explanations. It says so in the Bible, or it says so in the Quran, and I believe it, and that does it. Don't mess with me, I'll blow your head off. You can't
Sure.
reason somebody out of something they haven't reasoned themselves into. People believe in evolution not because they thought it through, but because someone they admire told them. If Pastor Jones were to tell them, hey, I was just kidding all the time, Jesus said he was evolution, even then they wouldn't believe it. I can't argue with people who don't believe in evolution. It's like the flat earth people or the we didn't know the moon people. Some people are not amenable to logic. Cut your losses, go on.
I apologize to revisit a previous subject that we were talking about, but a lot of people don't believe we went to space because of these Van Allen belts.
Yeah.
They say you can't pass through that because of the radiation or whatever, but it's spacecraft design, velocity, the positioning of those belts, etc., allows us to do so. Is that correct?
No, absolutely. Dangers from radiation are based upon two things: the amount of radiation received and the amount of time you're in it, because radiation sickness is cumulative. You can withstand a lot of radiation for a second. You can withstand radiation for 100 years if there's not very much of it. With even minimal shielding, going through the Van Allen belt, passing through the Van Allen belt, will not kill you. It will provide a calculable health hazard if you go through it. For example, the Apollo astronauts figured that going through the Van Allen belt on the way to and back to the moon would increase their chances of radiation sickness and subsequent issues like cancer by about 1.5%. So yeah, I can do it. But then the astronauts would only take that chance. It's like walking across the street. If you were to be in a very lightweight aluminum craft that were orbiting or were in the Van Allen belt for a longer period of time, then the chance of you getting radiation sickness or radiation-induced disease was likely to be greater. And if you happen to be there when there was a coronal mass ejection, it would be even more so. It'd be really dangerous. But bear in mind that even back in the 60s, scientists were tracking the sunspot activity, and they had a pretty good idea that at that particular time when the Apollo astronauts were going through the Van Allen belt, that the overall radiation level they projected would be pretty low. And they projected right, it was. I don't think any astronauts died of radiation sickness either before or after. Although some of them might have gotten sick. But no, it's something you take into consideration. Can you get killed crossing the street? Yeah, you can. Same with the Van Allen belt. Van Allen himself said that whole thing about the people being killed with the Van Allen belt was bogus.
My great-grandmother on my mother's side was Cherokee Indian, and you live in Mesa, Arizona. Do you have any experience with Native American culture in your area?
Well, my wife has more than I. She spent a couple of years as a flight nurse with a company called Life Flight, which is under contract to the Indian Health Service, taking Indians to and from hospitals from various spots in the Navajo and the Hopi and some of the Pueblo reservations. She has a better handle on what everyday life is like there. I've lived here though a lot, and of course, since I travel around a lot, I've been to a lot of the Paleo-Indian sites, the ruins of sites, and I've seen them, and I've read some stuff on them. I also know a lot of modern-day Navajo and even a few Hopi. So I guess I have as much knowledge about Indians as the average layperson does. I've read some anthropology. There's a couple of great books on Paleo-Indian history. One in particular by a guy named Stephen Mython is called After the Ice. It talks about, based on the latest anthropological and genetic studies, the settlement of North and South America by Paleo-Indians starting around 15,000 BC. And it's true that there's a lot of things that we know about the ancient history of Paleo-Indians. There's a lot of things we don't. There's still a lot of research going on.
If I may ask, who has been your favorite person to debate with on conspiracy websites, and over what topics?
Well, I like debating with people who come up with reasons why they believe what they do. There's a couple of folks that I really enjoy debating with, but I really it'd be kind of hard to pick one up. I guess the person that I enjoyed debating with at first, a long time ago, was a guy named Cliff Carnicom. He had a website, I guess he still does. He was the original chemtrail person. He owns a computer repair store, or did, in New Mexico, but he formed this group, which is just him, called the Chemtrail Research Institute, and ran a website. He came across as someone who knew an awful lot about it. However, most of his stuff was pretty much based on, I have the information from someone who must remain nameless, which of course is a red flag to me. Yeah, sure, it must remain English because your mom's name, so ignore that. And finally, he banned me from his program because even though I was from his website, because even though I was polite, I was beginning to pollute a few of his followers. But he was fun to debate with because he was kind of pompous, and I could deflate him pretty easy. As far as other people are concerned, I don't know. Most of the people that I debate with, Susie Q, you remember her. She was kind of funny. She really believed the stuff. She was not one of these phonies. I mean, she was wrong, but she really believed in it. And she would ask me questions to try to, get me to lose my control or lose my understanding. And she didn't. She ended up going away. But I liked her a lot. I don't know what she was like as a person, but as a debater, she was honest. Completely wrong, in my opinion, but honest. I guess she's probably one of my recent debating partners. Susie Q would be one time.
Have you ever met someone from the, quote, internet, unquote?
Yes, I have met several. There's an individual here who appears now and then on LOP, who has a lot of hobbies. He knows a lot about exploring caves and stuff like that in Arizona. He and I have gotten together on a couple of occasions. He's a Kimmy, but we still get along pretty well. And the only other person that you and I might know together that I have met and talked to extensively on the phone and stuff like that was Steve. And obviously, I'm still very disheartened in hearing about Steve's death. But he and I had, we had talked on the phones on several occasions, and we'd shared ammunition before. And yeah, he was a pretty rough guy, but I thought he was a fine fellow. And there's several people that I'm looking forward to meeting in person when I get a chance. There's quite a few folks out there. One person who I really admire and whom I have talked with off the internet is Geo Gal. She's a geological engineer. She knows her geology much better than I do, and I've enjoyed talking to her and hearing about her family. But as far as face-to-face people, I've only been 2 or 3. Next time I'm in Virginia, though,
just let me know.
There you go.
You've actually performed at a musical festival or been to a musical festival around here, haven't you?
Oh, yes, I have. I've done a lot of bluegrass festival. Well, I guess not around here. The closest one I've been to you, I guess, would be near Asheville, North Carolina. I don't know whether you're closer to Asheville, North Carolina, or whether you're closer to Fauquier County, which is in, just west of Washington, D.C. But I grew up in that area from the time I was 17 until I was 34. So I played a lot of bluegrass festivals in Virginia. You folks, they got some boys there can really pick good.
I love Asheville. I've been to Asheville a few times. It's just about 3 hours away.
Yeah, that's a pretty place to be. It really is. I enjoy it. But I went to a show called Merle Fest last. My friend and I got a kitchen pass from our wives. We spent a week there. We had a great time. all that blue. He's a bluegrass picker too. We just had a girl too. We each took our instruments with us, and we just stayed up all night picking and singing and howling like wolves. It's great.
A lot of people may not be aware of this, but Asheville, North Carolina is a very artsy college community.
It is.
And it's surrounded by beautiful scenery. There's a lot of nature there. A lot of good people there, too.
It's one of the few places, that I would consider moving to east of the Mississippi River. West Virginia and western North Carolina and western Virginia, to my mind, the culture there is wonderful. The weather is nice. You get your pick of all kinds of things there. That's a great place to be in. Since I moved to Arizona in 1978, I've been pretty much a hardcore Westerner, and I plan on moving one more time when I retire for the second time next year. But other from that, I like the southwestern United States. But North Carolina, parts of Virginia and West Virginia, that's a beautiful area.
What are the caves like in Arizona?
Pardon?
What are the caves like?
Well, caves, natural caves grow where you see them when there's a formation called karst, which is a kind of a limestone. You don't have too much of that here, though. In the southern part of the state, there's a very large cave complex called Karchner, which is a state park, and there's a couple of other states for other places further north. But Arizona does not have a lot of that karst geology in it, so you don't have that many natural caves like you would say in North and South Dakota, or in places like Kentucky and Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia. But there are a lot of abandoned mines here because Arizona is has always been a huge mining center. So there's a lot of abandoned gold and copper and tin and lead mines. And, you walk in and you take your life in your hands because, they could come falling down at any time. But that's what most of the caves are, is old abandoned mines.
The United States used to base its currency on the gold standard, I believe, and now we don't. Was that a mistake, or how do you feel about that? I see a lot on it, but I don't really understand the dynamics of the Federal Reserve too well.
Well, the Federal Reserve is one of those things that's kind of like the post office. It's a quasi-government agency. It is theoretically a private organization, but the head of it is appointed by the president with the approval of Congress. So the federal government, even though it is a private bank, it is a privately owned bank. It is the government's bank. It's the nation's bank, and it's the one that has the ability to loan money to everybody else. It doesn't print money. It doesn't do that, but it runs money for everybody else. And I think the Federal Reserve, provides some sort of capabilities. A lot of people don't like the Federal Reserve because it sounds like they're doing some other stuff. But they do control the economy both fiscally and monetarily, simply by controlling the amount of money that they loan out and by adjusting the interest rates up and down. So they're pretty powerful. But I think that they probably on the overall do more good than bad. However, I also believe that that gold does make a good currency. It doesn't inflate that much. I mean, we haven't found a secret stash of gold that's going to inflate the gold supply. And I think that we could have done worse by staying with the gold standard. Right now, the dollar is based on the quote full faith and credit of the United States government. So far, it's okay. Is it going to change? Well, it hasn't. The full faith and credit of the United States government has been pretty good, for the past 150 years. So I think it's about as stable as you can get. The gold, I don't know. I wouldn't mind having some more.
The value has gone up in recent years.
Well, has the value gone up or has the dollar gone down? Someone once said that 150 years ago, 1 ounce of gold could buy you a really nice suit. Now, an ounce of gold could buy you a really nice suit. So has the gold inflated or the dollar deflated? When you match, depends what you match the gold against. If you consider the value of the dollar to be the same, well, yeah, gold's gone up a lot. But the value of the dollar hasn't been the same. I think gold has gone up faster than the dollar has. I mean, the dollar might buy only 1/10 as much as it did 50 years ago, whereas gold would buy, more. But part of that's because people are speculating in gold. Buy the coins now and save them up. Maybe bitcoins are going to be the new gold. Everybody's trying to speculate them too. I don't know how that works out. I have Krugerrands. I have my brother, when he retired to Costa Rica, has a lot of gold. As a matter of fact, he's having issues in getting it out of the country to move it down to where he lives now. He's more of a gold bug than I am. He probably has $50,000 worth of gold at present rates. What's it going to be tomorrow? I don't know. Neither to see.
You made a really good point about the value of the dollar and the value of gold. Something to think about. Do you believe that we should fund a mission to Mars, manned?
Yes. Yes, I think we should. I mean, we're already doing it right now. We're having a mission to Mars, lots of missions to Mars. We're picking up more and more stuff. The Indians, for example, obviously, they're did a very ambitious, very cheap approach, and it's working out so far pretty well. God bless them. You know, we've landed on Mars. The Russians have not had that much luck. Most of their missions to Mars have failed, as have some of ours, and of course, as has the European ones. But yeah, we ought to fund a manned mission to Mars simply because we can. We need to go there and find out because that's the way we're wired.
What do you believe is the reason that Russia has had so many problems with their space program?
Well, let's look at how everybody in the world gets the space station now by Soyuz. Russia's early problems with their space program would be that they did not have the electronic skills, the mathematical evaluation, calculation, computational skills that we had back in the 60s and 70s, and they're only now getting it. They were being forced to go real fast and to compromise on a lot of safety issues because for them it was even more political than it was under Kennedy. So their early spacecraft, especially N1, way complex. They blew up all the time. However, if you notice now, Soyuz, which is 50 years old, basic design is 40 or 50 years old, is the one spaceship that everybody, includes the Americans, used to get to and from space. So right now, the Russian space program is doing pretty good when it comes to reliability. It was there before the shuttle came along, and it's there after the shuttle left. I think that the Russian engineers and designers, especially the great Sergei Korolev, who was probably the greatest designer of spacecraft in the world, even though he didn't get much credit for it, the designers are top rate. If you combine our money and our electronic skills with their actual mechanical skills, we can rule the world. Better yet, we can rule the universe. Give us enough time. So I wouldn't sell the Russians short. The Chinese, I don't know. I don't know what the Shenyang is like. But I know the Indians, they're in the news right now with their Mars program. It's doing pretty good. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting time to see what happens with the different countries.
Do you think that cooperation between the United States and Russia in space exploration will become more common, or do you think the politics will push us towards more competitive?
Oh, I think it will become more common. You look at the Russian aircraft. Most of the Russian airlines are flying Airbuses and Boeings. They're not flying Ilyushins anymore because they don't work. The Russians don't have a lot of money. They've got tremendous skills, and they don't have any money. So they're going to be happy to jump on board anything that we can offer them, and we should. What I'd really like to see is that the Americans and the Russians and the Chinese, because the Chinese have the willpower to do it. I mean, they're going to put a man on the moon as soon as they can. And their space programs, and God knows how many screw-ups they've had because they didn't used to talk about it. But now we're seeing good results out of the Chinese. I'd like to see everybody, all the major people. There's a bunch of folks that we ought to be working into us. The Russians, the Chinese, the Indians, the Europeans, the Brazilians, all these guys have space programs. And we ought to be constantly going back and forth. What do you got? What do you got? Let me see what you got. I'll show you what I got. You need to cooperate because that's the only way we're going to win. Space is too big for one country. It has to be a whole world thing. It doesn't have to be controlled by one world, but there has to be a free flow of ideas and money. And there will be. I hope.
The Cold War between the United States and Russia ended a few years back. Since then, has the world become more safe, or do you think it's made the world less safe?
Less safe. It's become less safe. The Russians had a lot of nuclear bombs, but they weren't nuts. The Chinese had a lot of nuclear bombs, and they weren't nuts. The nuclear weapons are now becoming more and more available to a lot of Islamic fundamentalist jihadists, and they are nuts.
They are very dangerous. Some of them are very dangerous people.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that maybe not Iran, but at least Hezbollah, if they ever got their hand on a nuclear missile, they would immediately commit suicide with it. But in order to do that, they would have to nuke Israel. That's where the problems I see. Israel has a lot of nuclear weapons, and they have the will to use them. And if one of those, but yet they won't because they're not nuts unless they see themselves being destroyed. But there are people out there that have nuclear weapons or are going to have access to nuclear weapons that are nuts. Pakistan comes to mind. Pakistan is, quote, a democracy, but it's on the thin edge of falling apart, and it does have nuclear weapons. That's what scares me. The rise of Islamic fundamentalism and the amount of nuclear weapons that's being sold or that can be sold to these guys by places in Pakistan and Iran and North Korea. That's a lot scarier than the Cold War. You can work with the Russians. You can work with the Chinese. Chinese look upon America as being their best trading partner. We may argue a lot, but we work together. Russians the same way. The jihadists are not that way. They subordinate everything to their belief, and their belief takes back their belief. If their belief is to destroy us, they will have the willpower, and someday they will have the military or technological means to do so. So I think Cold War, we're going to look back at the old duck and cover days as being, those are the good old days when all we had to worry about was the communists.
Is there a way to slow down the spread of fundamentalist Islam without going to war?
I don't see how. Obviously, when we go to war with them, we win the war and lose the peace. Look at Iraq and Syria. We could, if we invaded Syria, we could beat them, but we would lose we cannot maintain control over a company. We're not an occupier. We don't have that skill to occupy a country. Look at Afghanistan. We can't do that. So we can't beat them in a war. Winning the hearts and minds by blowing them up isn't going to work for squat. We could try to undermine them, but how good is that going to be? Let's give the people a chance to vote for the right people. Well, that was the Arab Spring, and look what you have. Mohamed Morsi elected democratically in Egypt. You have Muammar Gaddafi overthrown in Libya, and it's turned into a disaster area. If we could overthrow or we could destabilize Iran and get rid of Khamenei and those mullahs, how do we know what would replace them? I don't see how we can stop them. They have too much. They have too much to gain and too little to lose by getting involved in any sort of détente with the Western powers. They really do. That's. I don't know how you deal with them. I don't think anybody else does.
Neither do I.
Yeah, you can't bomb them back to the Stone Age because that won't work either. They'll bomb us back, and that's you don't want to murder 400 or 500 million people just because they're in the way. I think that what we're doing now is this idea of bouncing back and forth. For example, in the past 3 or 4 months, we've already ticked off the Saudis, our longtime clients, because we're making kissy-kissy to the Iranians. Well, we should. The Iranians are a more powerful country, and the only thing the Saudis had going for them is they had a lot of oil, which we don't need that much anymore because of our recent discoveries. So playing one of them off against another doesn't seem to work. We got the Saudis ticked off enough, and they could work with the Israelis, as they probably are doing right now, and they could take it. They could attack Iran. But what good did that do? You wouldn't kill all the Iranians. You wouldn't want to. You wouldn't kill any. You wouldn't kill all of everybody. You just make everybody angrier. So I do not know how this thing is going to end. I do not know. It's going to be an interesting next 30 or 40 years.
The spread of science and education is the only thing that I can think of that may be able to slow it down. I don't know.
Maybe the spread of radical Christianity, like that worked in the 1100s. With the Crusaders for a while. But, do the people care about science? The If you have a country that's ruled by people that see it in their best interest to keep everybody else in their country ignorant, look at the Taliban, for example, how are you going to do that breakthrough? I mean, the Pakistanis and the Arabs, the Persians, all those guys, they have access to technology. They're just using it to communicate plots and plans to blow us up and making weapons and things like that. How do you get the normal people to become more rational? I don't know. Sorry, I figure someone as old as I would have all the answers, but I don't. I don't know what's going to happen. So we're just going to have to see where it takes us. Meanwhile, keep prepping.
I don't think prepping is a bad thing. A lot of people think that I may be anti-prepper or whatever. Actually, I'm not. I understand that you do collect firearms, right?
I have a few.
What's your favorite one?
Well, if I had to have one firearm, it would probably be a short carbine chambered in 22 long rifle. I think the 22 long rifle and the 12 gauge cartridges are the two greatest things that ever came down the pike. You can't take out an elk at 600 yards or shoot up a squad of masons with them, but from a survival point of view, they're easy to operate, cheap, good to get parts on, good to work with. I think everybody should have a couple of 12 gauge firearms, preferably shotguns, and several 22 caliber rifles. I think they're excellent. I don't leave home without one. Now, if you're going to have a carry gun, you might want to have something that would be a little bit more powerful. I personally prefer revolvers. I like the 357 Magnum 38 Special revolver, although a lot of people like the 9mm auto-loading pistol. Both of my children are very much auto-loading pistol people. They both have, my daughter and my son both have and use and practice with 9mm auto-loading pistols. They like them a lot. To me, I don't know, it's just 6 of one, half dozen of another.
How do you feel about the quality of American manufactured items? I know we do manufacture good weapons in this country, but as far as automobiles, motorcycles, mechanical things, has our ability to manufacture these, has it declined, in your opinion?
Well, I used to say that, having owned one in the past, I used to say that Harley-Davidson motorcycles were overpriced junk. They're not. Not anymore. They're very good motorcycles, but they're hideously overpriced for what you get. And I think that the problem with American manufacturing is that we cannot provide a good level of manufactured goods at the same price other places can. Now, there are some things that are so complex that very few people can manufacture them. Aircraft, of course, is a prime example. We sold 258 airplanes last week at Dubai Air Show for an estimated value of $100 billion. It's a lot of money, but those airplanes are worth it to the people who bought it. In most cases, though, anything that we can build here for $10,000, you can build in South Korea for $8,000 and in Indonesia for $5,000. And some of the stuff you can manufacture in Bangladesh for half of that. So our lack of competitiveness is not necessarily our quality, but our cost of production. Because we expect Americans to be paid a lot of money, we have OSHA regulations and unions and rules like that that drive up the costs. Doesn't mean that's a bad thing, but they just drive up the cost. And if you want to be competing, you have to lower your production costs, which is why so many places, American factories, go overseas. They'd go bankrupt. So the problem is not our inability to manufacture good stuff, it's the inability to manufacture good stuff cost effectively.
If you could choose one automobile to have in a end of civilization scenario, what would you pick?
Well, my wife and I have one. It is a Nissan Xterra. It's got a 4-liter V6 engine. It's 4-wheel drive, and it's able to pull our pop-up, which is it's the one that we take whenever we want to go someplace. It will go. It runs out. I run out of courage before it runs out of torque, and it doesn't have good gas mileage. I also have a bug-out bike, which is my little Kawasaki, which has been set up for what I call adventure touring. But it only carries one person. If I had to have a vehicle that would be all around, that I could use as a bug-out vehicle as well as an everyday driver, I'd probably pick a Subaru. I'd probably pick a Subaru. When I was in Japan, I worked at the Subaru factory because they also make aerospace stuff. And some of those Subarus, the Outbacks, and they're good cars. But all I can afford now is my motorcycle and my Nissan. So far, they've worked so far. Haven't let me down yet. Of course, I haven't had a bug out yet.
How long have you been riding a bike?
I got a motor scooter when I was 14. I got my first motorcycle when I was 18. So from the motorcycle, I've been on the motorcycle for 50 years. I'm on 2 wheels for 54 years. Yeah. I like to ride motorcycles. I don't like to go fast. I mean, I'm not a hot dog. I used to be a hot dog, but there aren't very many motorcyclists that are hot dogs that last too long. So I drive like a reasonably sane person. I have my off-road bike that I don't do wheelies, and my road bike, I just get on the freeway and I go 70 miles an hour. It takes me all the way to Idaho, and I don't have to worry about falling off.
How would you describe the feeling of riding a motorcycle to someone who only drives a car?
It's like trying to explain what it's like to be a scuba diver. Scuba diving is like having it's like when you have a dream that you can fly, and in scuba diving you're really doing it, and you're in an alien world, and you're flying in slow motion, and it is incredible. Motorcycling is sort of like that. You're limited to 2 dimensions, but you see more, and you smell more, and you feel more, and there's more of an excitement and a joy in riding a motorcycle than there is in any other vehicle that I have been on. I used to fly airplanes. Well, I have flown airplanes, small airplanes, and they're fun, but not that much fun. Motorcycles are better. That's my opinion.
What was your favorite trip?
I guess it was on the bike.
Yes.
I rode my Yamaha 2 years ago up to Alberta and back in the summertime. I hit a real heavy rainstorm in northern Arizona. Fortunately, I learned that I can ride my motorcycle at 50 miles an hour on a freeway in heavy rain, and my rain suit would keep me dry. That was a good thing to learn. I felt good about that. And going through Utah and Idaho and Alberta and Montana was just absolutely gorgeous. I could see stuff I'd never seen before. I could breathe air I'd never breathed before. That was a great motorcycle trip.
If you could say something to the community that's listening to this program, what would you like to tell?
I don't dislike any of you guys. I think you're all fun. I hope you don't take personally what my beliefs are, because I don't take them as what yours are. I like you to think about things. Read some books written by people who disagree with you. Make your own decisions. Try to keep an open mind, but not so open that your brain falls out. And if you haven't tried it, may I strongly recommend Michelob Amber Bock beer. That's it.
Okay. I do appreciate your advice, and I appreciate your time. This will conclude this interview. And
Thank you for having me.
I hope you had a good time. I did.
I certainly had a good time. I'm looking forward to hearing myself.
Well, hopefully you'll decide to come back on, and hopefully I'll have some of the audio issues ironed out by then.
Sounds like a plan. Be looking forward to hearing you.
Okay, you have a great day, sir.
You too, Chris.
Thanks for your time. Bye-bye.